You're good.
All right, so John, you and I were just talking about kind of what does the rest of the day look like. We have asked Danny to join us, and she's going to walk us through the last element of your Educators of Color proposal that we have not yet countered. And then during the break, I had shared that one of our guests that we were expecting to join us is having an unanticipated issue that's going to keep her away, but we're going to make sure that we connect in some other way to get that information back to y'all. And then so Sean had to leave, and I know that we were talking about having communication about zone schools. And so we're more than happy to, I can speak for myself, I'm more than happy to stay and have that conversation and gather any questions. I think you had mentioned earlier, John, that it might be the case that some of them are questions that we need to take back to some people to get information about. So I think that even though Sean had to step away, I think we can still make progress there with the understanding that we'll need to loop back to some people to finalize some responses possibly.
Sure. So when we get to present, we'll need a brief break. I'm sorry to everyone who's probably watching and wondering what's with the start and stop. We'll need a brief break to review who will be taking what portion of it. And then, but we will, yep, that's fine, the way you're presenting, so.
Okay. Well, Sharon, you've been our MC, like I said earlier. Would you like to do the introduction?
I'd be happy to. I'm not sure I deserve the MC status, but I love doing the introductions. And I certainly love to introduce the phenomenal Danny Ledesma. Danny is our Senior Advisor on Racial Equity and Social Justice. She works directly with the superintendent, leadership, and all of the teams across the district on our racial equity and social justice goals and lens. And while she probably wouldn't say very much about herself, for those of you who don't know her, she comes with decades of experience, maybe not that many decades, Danny, a lot of deep experience in this work around equity, diversity, and inclusion. Worked at the Coalition for Communities of Color, has worked as a policy advisor to several of our governors, as well as at the city of Portland, among many, many other ways that she has worked for this these goals across many communities. So welcome, Annie. Thank you for taking your time this afternoon.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Sorry you had to sit through the introduction. I think the one thing that you forgot to say is that I started my career as an educator. I taught in high school in California, and I have to be honest, like in all of the work that I've ever done, I've never had the heart swells like I did when I was a teacher. So I really, just it feels good to be back at home at PPS doing this work. So I know that you have had a long day, and so I'll be really brief. When Lisa and the team presented the proposal to me, I was really thrilled because I see so much alignment and a lot of excitement. And I think when I saw your proposal, I was really excited because I'd love to think through ways that we can collaborate even more as we think about the sort of supports as well as professional development for educators at PPS. And I hope it can really be a collaborative process. So in the response that we suggested, I wanted to sort of like bring a little bit of more sort of alignment to our RESJ professional development competencies. You just had an awesome opportunity to hear from the fabulous Dr. Kimberly Mateer. Dr. Mateer and myself and Sharon worked on developing the set of competencies around racial equity and social justice. I think, you know, living and working in Portland, I know that there's often the conception that like you're either woke or you're not, and it can be a little bit mystical. And so we really wanted to be really clear, not just for students, but really for all of the adults in our system about sort of what we meant around what it means in terms of knowing about racial equity and social justice, but also what it means to apply and to use this understanding in service of our students. What does this look like in terms of trying to close our gaps, and how can we really offer some aligned sort of study and practice support to further our goals. So I think what made me really excited is that the topics that you talked about that were of importance to you around bias, around anti-racism, culturally responsive and sustaining practices, those are all sort of embedded in those competencies that are outlined in that framework. And it's from that framework that we are trying to build a set of professional development series. And so we've started a little bit, but it's been an interesting year. So I think that we're really at a point where we can collaborate and work together to really fill out the rest of the professional development opportunities for educators, to really think through what is the training, but also the complementary supports that we can provide as a district, and how that aligns with educators' needs and interests in terms of those sets of competencies. So I really see a lot of alignment, and I'm really excited I hope that you receive these as really just small kind of tweaks in terms of what I think we can accomplish together in terms of what the proposal was. So thank you so much for proposing that and letting us chat about it. I'm really excited about this work and excited about the opportunity to work together. And of course, I'm a teacher nerd, so I love the idea that we get to talk about learning as adults and sort of like what that's going to look like in terms of learning for students. So really, really excited about this and glad to see so much support and interest here. So whatever I can do to be helpful or supportive, I hope you'll see me as a resource.
Thank you for that.
Who delivers? Sorry, John. Who would deliver the professional development training?
Currently, we're working with the Center for Equity and Inclusion, and that is for a portion of those competencies. So we've identified sort of like a first set. So for example, like 1.1, and some of those are the like 4.2. So we've identified some of those, and CEI has really tailored, and I'm sorry, the Center for Equity and Inclusion is CEI. They've been wonderful in sort of really kind of adapting a lot of their methodology and pedagogy to these competencies. They've also had a lot of experience because they're local. And so many of their trainers, their staff, are going through the same teacher preparation programs, have been teaching in PPS schools or PPS parents, and have a lot of deep relationships with a lot of educators. So in terms of that selection for this sort of building phase of the development, I felt really confident about that. We've also had quite a few educators who've gone through their equity certificate program, and we got a lot of positive feedback from PPS educators. And in fact, it was a PPS educator who sort of like encouraged me, and we emailed back and forth about sort of like thinking about this partnership with CEI. So I feel really good about the partnership, and we've, it's been an unusual year in terms of sort of kicking this off. So I think there's lots of room for adapting and adjusting so that it really works for folks. They're a really great partner and really wanting to make sure that this is working for the adults in service of the students. And so it feels like a really great and aligned partnership.
I loved your comments about working collaboratively, but I see that well, not you personally, please, the pronoun, I keep using you and I don't mean you personally, right? I mean, the district struck the last sentence that we had in our presentation that the association and the district would work together to see who's going to develop and offer the trainings. Was there a reason why? I mean, we do really want to be collaborative in this process, but we wanted it to be actual collaboration, not just the receptor of, but helping to shape. Is there a reason? I mean, what was the? I don't mean it as a super challenge, but what was the thinking behind striking that?
I think that we wanted to really sort of like bear the burden of the planning and the implementation, that we didn't want it to be something that was that there are sort of between myself, between Sharon and her team, and between Dr. Mateer and her team, that there are folks who are sort of charged with this work. But the intent is always to do this in collaboration. So I think there are some wheels that have started turning, and I think that there's lots of rooms within the framework and within sort of how we build out. But I think we really wanted to make sure is that the sort of that the responsibility is shared and really owned in terms of sort of my job description and accountability to the superintendent.
And I just want to emphasize that part that Danny shared about some wheels have started turning. I think, John, what you've heard Danny describe is that this isn't a starting point for her. This is a midway point. And we've done so much work with CEI in order to develop and pilot the training that's going to be rolling out to teachers, that I think that was a really big reason for us striking that. Again, it's not that we don't want to collaborate on the training, but I do think that we would lose a lot of work that the district has already put in if we were to not honor that history that's been in partnership that's already developed with CEI.
So do you believe that the association would reject CEI?
No, but I do think that there's something, so I think this was more an attempt to be transparent, right? Like saying, yes, we'll collaborate to select seems sort of disingenuous when we have an organization that we've already developed with, and we don't want to lose that work, if that makes sense. I think that you all will love CEI. They do amazing work.
Yeah.
I just want to speak to that part of what we originally wrote, to say that we've had feedback from our members that some trainings in the past and the top come to us, to the members, as really top-down initiatives with that can be ill-fitting in the situation. And we included that language because of that feedback that teachers had given us, that sometimes that happens.
I think that's a really good point. I think that in the years that I've been doing this, notice I said years, not decades. In the years that I've been doing this, one of the things that I've sort of come to understand is that no sort of like sustaining change or sustaining transformation can be completely top down or completely ground up, right? There has to be that sort of like balance between the two. And in terms of the sort of like buy-in and authenticity of the work, there really has to be that sort of set of collaboration. And I think that that's one of the ways that we're trying to do it. I think some of the early planning around this has been really about wanting to see sort of like accountability and leadership really taking on, and not asking folks to participate in something before leadership and other folks have sort of learned that, so that we wouldn't have educators sort of walking into spaces where they had knowledge and expertise beyond what folks who are supervising or folks that they're collaborating with. So I think that what we've really tried to do is to kind of, to your point, make sure that we're sort of striking that balance between the sort of like what sort of starts with leadership and what sort of starts with sort of more grassroots movements, and sort of how do we meet in the middle, because ultimately that's what sustains. One without the other doesn't have buy-in and doesn't have longstanding and authentic sort of trust that's built. And so we're trying to find that balance. And so I think that's why I'm really thrilled about the enthusiasm that folks have about wanting to really sort of create more space and opportunity for learning and support in this area, because it's not one person or one school or one employee group, but it really is going to take a shared understanding and a collective commitment and understanding to be able to move through this. And it's very complex. It's very tricky. And I think educators understand this better than many other sectors, because you understand that to know how to add is one thing, but to be able to utilize addition in everyday life, and to be able to apply that knowledge of addition and subtraction to be able to encounter deeply held problems really sets you up. And so I think that the approach that we're really trying to do is, how do we in a phased and very strategic way sort of build that understanding and that application, so that throughout the district there is a really profound movement and change. And she says it better than I do, but when Dr. Mateer talks about that transformation, this is, sort of what I think is our best lever. And I think it's why we're all involved in education, right? Like, learning is so powerful, and shared and collective learning is really powerful, especially amongst adults who are really committed to our students. And so I think that this is, I can't express how enthusiastic I am about the opportunity to really sort of think through how we can do this together and continue to build year after year, so that we have really robust supports for our educators. And
I think.
Go ahead, Emmy.
I guess I've heard you say collaboration a number of times and work together, but I haven't so far heard, like, where will educators come in to collaborate? Like, at what point do you imagine PAT or educators coming in to collaborate?
Yeah, so
Yeah, I mean,
sure.
if I can briefly, that's, we have educators who have worked in this district for a long while, who have seen initiatives come and go. Some of them they're sad to see leave, and some of them they are glad to have go, but none of them they have had a voice in helping to shape and or change. And this last bit is extremely important. We agree with you that we're excited. We're happy both parties want to do this. But we do want to have a say, the organization and the members of our organization, not the organization as a sort of, it's the people who make up the PAT. Many of those members want to be able to say, yeah, I buy into this because I had a voice in this. And that is what is really important for us.
Absolutely. So, oh, go ahead.
Can I say one thing that I wanted to say? I just, feedback is important. Buy-in is super important. I think it's also important, as we talk about this particular topic, for us to acknowledge that for the majority of our members and our staff, one of the number one tenets is that we have to be willing to be uncomfortable. And so I just wanted to call our attention to that, so we can stay centered in that. That doesn't mean that we might have PDs on this topic that aren't structured correctly or aren't working for whatever reason. But this is unique work, because it is work that's meant to make us uncomfortable.
I don't.
What has that got to do, though, with what we're talking about? I don't understand what the connection with what we just said.
Oh,
Sorry,
I mean,
please.
in terms of, no, I mean, in terms of, there was a comment earlier about members potentially not reporting back displeased feedback about some of the trainings that they have experienced recently, possibly with CEI. And so I just wanted to name and center around that, like that I think it's, again, this type of work, this type of PD does make a large number of people uncomfortable.
But that's not necessarily why the feedback, that educators,
right.
Yeah, that's not, I don't know why.
I'm not saying it is why. It's just it's unique, and we need to make sure that we're teasing out any feedback or any criticism that's happening of the PD from that unique aspect of it.
So this is a proposal, and that line in particular came directly from our educators of color, who wanted to make sure that the training that we do around racial equity involved the voices of educators of color and in determining and shaping what it is. And absolutely in support of the work, the idea that, of course, racial equity training may make people uncomfortable, but we also need to be able to have conversations about if it is effective, if it is hitting, there's more to it than that. But that, just like all of these proposals, this is a request from our educators of color.
So if I could respond about a couple of ways that there's opportunities for collaboration. So as Dr. Mateer, and I think that you've heard from other folks in these conversations, is that we're sort of like at the tailwind of our strategic plan, of which there have been members who've been involved. And as we're sort of building out like what this specific body of work looks like it's in System Shift B, there's a couple of places where we've gotten feedback around sort of like how the work can progress. So there's, you'll notice that we have competencies laid out there, but we don't necessarily have a rubric about sort of like, what does that actually look like? And so, as part of our strategic planning process, a big body of work is how can we develop a rubric aligned to these competencies? And this is where I think it's important to have educator voice in that work, because especially in sort of some of the application pieces. So that's one place where, in terms of I guess what I would say, I think that there's really strategic ways that educators can be involved in this work, and sort of shaping the rubric is one thing. I think the other piece is that as we are looking at not only the sort of the who in terms of the training, I think it's also really important to collaborate on the what, right? So we've identified the sort of first set of competencies. And so I think another way that we can collaborate together is thinking about like, what's that next set of competencies? Like where are educators wanting to deepen their knowledge, sort of hone in their practice, and how do we sort of identify those, and then work together to identify the type of training and or support that's needed. I think a lot of times when we think about these rubrics and professional development, we may get stuck in training. And so I think some of the conversations around like peer support, some of the conversations around ways that we can sort of tap into the knowledge and expertise of folks within the district is another way that we can really sort of collaborate. So I guess what I would say is that I think I see and understand that you feel like that collaboration on the sort of like choosing which person or which entity might deliver the thing is tough. But I guess I just want to reassure you that I think on the sort of deeper work of the what and the how, that's really where I see collaboration kind of moving forward, and really want to sort of have those conversations with folks. This has been, sort of work that's evolving, and we want to make sure that we're sort of bringing as many people along. I think we wanted to pause a little bit for the strategic plan to sort of to be laid out. And I know that we've worked really hard to make sure that we have member voice in the strategic planning process, and that we had sort of folks who are informing that. So I think you can imagine more of those sort of intentional planning processes, and a really strong desire to want to be influenced, so that we can ensure that the sort of like that the educator voice, that the community teacher, the community parent, student voice is sort of embedded in this work. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities in this work, and I hope that you're reading. When I say opportunity, I just want to be transparent. It's a lot of hard work and a lot of time. So I think that that's something that I'm really looking forward to.
Thanks. And you just mentioned the member voice in the strategic planning process. Could you talk a little bit more about how you saw that as a successful example of educator voice?
I think that we had the advisory committee, as well as folks who were on each of the system shifts who were able to sort of participate, was something that is important in that, like, the strategic plan is our roadmap in moving forward and really sort of helping to direct how this specific strand of work will move forward.
And who were the educators involved in the system shift? I was surprised to hear you say that, because I've been asking about if there's something I didn't see. But as far as I know, I think there were only out of 70 people in that group, 5 of them are PAT members, and it was brought up a lot of times that there wasn't educator voice in the process. I think only one of those is located in a building, and the rest work in the BESC.
So if you think about 70 of 9,000, 9,500 folks, it really is just a small subsection of all of the different employees. And so in my mind, I think it's sort of, we try to balance all of the different sort of employee groups there, and because it is such an important document.
Thank you. Elizabeth's question went exactly to what I was wondering. And I think this is where, I mean, obviously our comments are coming from a place where you're probably already seeing this from our comments. We don't perceive this as significant and or important member voice in the process here. And it's, we are not against the work that's being done. But as to whether or not member voice has significantly or meaningfully been incorporated, that's something that we might have different takes on. So our proposal is intended specifically to address that. We intend an intentional, specific, and real partnership with the district in moving forward on this, which is why we were the ones who made the proposal on it. It's fine to do a counter proposal. We get that, and we understand that work has been done. But moving forward, if we did not think that it was important to incorporate a role for the organization officially in this work, we would never have made the proposal in the first place. So, I mean, I ask you to consider that, your side of the table to consider that as we move forward in these discussions, because we are going to have to make sure before this is done that is part of the final solution.
And I have one more question, probably an easier one. It talks about eventually reaching all staff and cohorts. Can you talk about your model and vision for kind of the timeline? Eventually could be a long time. And we're hoping to kind of have a sense of what you think is realistic in terms of, you talked about, having a collective and shared experience, right, around this work. And I think that's something we value as well. And so can you talk about how you see this reaching all staff? Yeah.
So eventually was our attempt at being really transparent about sort of moving this to scale. So if you look at the RESJ framework, there are several competencies. And so I want to be realistic and I also want to make sure that we're setting the expectation that you don't go from 0 to 100 in any of these, right? That this is something that is a journey, and it's probably overused. And so we wanted to sort of make sure that we're really being realistic about that. So as we develop the rubric and we sort of talk about sort of how we start to standardize that, I think we can get closer on how we timeline and sort of add the sort of like number of hours needed. But I think that we wanted to also be really clear that strategically we are not doing this in a sort of like, we really want to make sure that this is differentiated and that this isn't sort of like a one and done, and that every group has the same experience. And so we've adopted a sort of cohort model. And so we want to sort of like make sure that we're developing the phases in that way. We also anticipate that as we are going into the program, one of the things that we do is a pre and a post survey. And we want to make sure that like we're getting the feedback, not only about sort of like the logistics and did the Zoom work, or were the muffins tasty, but also what was learned, like, what was maybe a missed opportunity? How can we really sort of deepen the curriculum and sort of continue to expand the curriculum? So I think at this moment, we're really sort of in this sort of like phased approach, really make sure that we're getting it strong, understanding how different groups, how it might need to be differentiated to be able to continue to move up to scale. And so we just want to be really transparent that a sort of one and done, everyone gets the same thing at the same time is not effective. It goes back to, I think, what Thea was talking about, sort of like a top down, everyone will take this many hours at this time. It just doesn't sustain or really isn't effective. So that eventually is really language to be able to acknowledge and to be transparent about the really sort of big lift. And I think what we all want is a really powerful learning experience. And so we want to make sure that we're doing it in a strategic way that's in phases, with allowing time for continuous learning and improvement.
So I know this is already underway, like there's already work going on. So what's the plan for next year? Is there a number of schools that you are already planning to bring into this work, or is there a number of years before it's reached all schools?
So we have we've only had one school, one whole school that's gone through it. We've done different types of cohorts. I think one of the things that we wanted to do was have this conversation with you all before we started planning the cohorts for next year. This year was a little bit. How do I say this? This year was challenging with scheduling. So we had several cohorts who are a little bit behind because of, sort of like going into virtual, going into hybrid and some of that. So, I want to be really transparent that, this time of year last year, we had like great aspirations about what we were going to do and where we'd be, but we're just a little bit behind. And I think, conversations like these are really important, and wanted to kind of, hear more about sort of, kind of where you all were and sort of where you might see opportunities. I think we want to have some conversations about how do we begin to sort of like onboard cohorts of educators, and sort of what that looks like. Is it, like you said, is it a school by school? Is it, is there other ways that we can sort of think about it? Is it like, middle schools? Is it elementary schools? There's a lot of ways you can kind of slice and dice that. And so we want to kind of get your thoughts and expertise, and also your members, and get a sense of kind of how to move into that. And I think we also have to kind of gauge everyone's sort of bandwidth and capacity as well, so as we try to sort of bring this to scale after what's been a pretty intense year.
Danny, can you tell me where was this piloted? What school?
Say again?
I believe you said this was piloted at a school. Did I mishear that?
Oh yeah,
Which school?
You just cut out. I'm so sorry about that. It was Vernon Elementary.
Okay. Well, yeah. So I just wanted to, reiterate some of the things that my colleagues have said here. I mean, these trainings, I think you can agree with this. I think we can agree on a lot, actually. These trainings aren't trainings just to be had, right? The work here is a lot deeper than that, right? And the goal, I think, is some version of like a cultural shift or creating organizational change. Every single time I've seen, groups engage in this without like getting a deep level of buy-in from everybody involved, it doesn't work, right? So that collaboration is not a luxury. It is essential to this process, and it is stated as a component by our educators of color as something that is essential to this actually working. So I've heard, maybe I'm missing something here, but I'm still not seeing how there's the concrete plan for that collaboration to happen. So I would encourage this group here to continue to think about that, because I'm not sure. I'm not sure that, I don't think that any of us want to have these trainings just to have them, right? We want them to have an impact. And that's not a criticism of the group that you're working with. It's not a criticism of anybody that's putting it together. I'm sure that people are very qualified to do what they're doing, but to not get that stakeholder buy-in, like at every level, is I think jeopardizes the process.
And I just wanted to clarify, I teach at Vernon. It was not the whole staff that received this training or went through this pilot.
I guess since Brian's gone, I'm maybe, well, Sharon and I can share MC responsibilities. Does anyone have any additional questions for Danny? Should we move on to our next topic?
Well, I just wanted to say, you were saying that you thought we should be having more conversation about the rollout, I guess. And so is there a framework? Is there, I mean, I don't know, are you sending out surveys to schools? Are you asking for another, side conversation with us about how this could roll out, or what's your thinking on that?
I think it could happen in a variety of ways. I think I've kind of wanted to defer to this process and sort of make sure that you're sort of get through this process, and sort of as soon as this process is over, I think there's lots of ways where you can do that. And I think I can definitely be, sort of flexible and adaptable. And I just want to, I think that we've got like a really strong framework, but in terms of being able to sort of like get in there and sort of influence and sort of build on the work, there's still lots of opportunities to do that. And so I hope that you don't walk away feeling like that this is something that is completely cooked. In fact, I want to be really transparent that there's a lot of development around this. And I don't think that we'll be successful without a lot of continued conversation. So again, I think I've wanted to wait and defer to this process. So given sort of, where you all are and sort of the outcome of this, I think we can start, whenever, and it can, we can decide together sort of how to make it more or less formal as you'd like.
Thank you for that. Okay. I mean, anyone else from our team with a question? Okay, hearing that, thank you very much. I really appreciate the response. Honestly, I agree with you. It's exciting to see both sides working on this very same stuff, and we look forward to moving forward. So, and Lisa, I guess it is time for the next subject, which is, I don't even know where we are right now.
Well, I saw Sharon can't come off mute. Were you just going to MC, Sharon, or did you have something substantive that you wanted to say?
Well, I thought where we were is moving to acceleration schools and getting PATs, because I understand that you have a number of questions that we'd like to understand.
Okay, then in that case, we just need a few moments to be able to make sure that everybody understands their parts and follows the playbill. So how about we take 10 minutes? That's all we'll need maximum, and we may be able to come back earlier. So why don't we take a brief break and we'll come right back.
Okay, sounds